Hey guys, Diego here, and welcome back to the fourth episode of History of Steam Locomotives. And of course, y'all probably know what it is by now, but it's the famous Cotton Belt 819. So let's get into the history of this locomotive. Well, a lot of y'all might be wondering, a lot of y'all might be wondering, why am I doing this engine now? Well, basically, I'm doing it now so I can get so I can do the history. Alright, the history of the engines, Alright, guys, here we go. So, the St. Louis Southwestern Railroad, better known as the Cotton Belt Railroad, had an experience of steam excursion program similar to the Chicago, Burlington, Quincy. Oh, why am I doing that? We haven't even been to those yet. But we will, guys. We'll get to that engine. So, the St. Louis Southwestern Railroad had a steam excursion program with Cotton Belt 819s. But before we get to those, we'll get to that later. So, the 819 was built in 1943 at the Pine Bluff shops as the last engine built by the St. Louis Southwestern Railroad, which was unofficially known as the Cotton Belt Road, or simply known Cotton Belt. The locomotive was basically used for freight train service, and it was a really good and a really strong locomotive. It was a really good engine in the early 1940s until a few years later, the locomotive was retired and put on a shed in Pine Bluff Park, similar to how the 587 was. A few years later, the engine looked like a shell of its former self. And right here, like this picture of the 819, it kind of looks like a New York Central Hudson, don't you think? Nah. But, yeah, the engine sat there for a few years and it was beginning to rust. Until the 819 was purchased by the Cotton Belt, and it was moved back to the Pine Bluff shops, where she was built for restoration. Work on the locomotive has been like this until it was finally back up and running out of the shops. It was finally fired up, moved out of the shops under its own power and ready for excursion service. The locomotive made a few excursion runs in the few years. It ran a few excursion runs over the years, and one of my favorite runs is when she went to St. Louis, Missouri to participate in that year's National Railway Historical Society convention, along with 3 other special locomotives. And they were Norfolk and Western 1218, Union Pacific 844, and Frisco 1522. After the St. Louis run, the 819 was sent back, and it did a few more excursion runs in Pine Bluff. The engine still ran very well through the years, and it was a really powerful locomotive, and it kept running. And this locomotive was an extremely powered locomotive. A lot of people have rail fanned the locomotive, and it has been a really great excursion star. until a few years later, the 819 had to be retired. And after that, after the final run, the fire was put out and it was put back into the Pine Bluff shops, where she was built for maintenance work. Work on the engine has been like this ever since. The and the 819 was put back into the Pine Bluff shops, where she was built for restoration, where she resides today. Whether or not the engine will run again, the locomotive has been wanted to come back by many rail fans, including myself. And enable for it to happen is that the Pine Bluff shops has to raise $1 million to rebuild this locomotive, to buy the parts to rebuild the locomotive. The museum is currently raising funds, and if everything goes well, the Pine Bluff shops will continue to bring the pride of Pine Bluff back to service. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please leave a comment and if you want this engine to be restored now, leave a comment, or comment down below. What are your thoughts on the 819? Do you think the engine should be restored or what do you think they should happen to the 819? What do you think the 819's future should be? I think having it to run in San Antonio for our steam excursion program would be a great idea. And no, San Antonio is not a branch line. San Antonio is a main line. And obviously, 819 is a mainline engine. And it would be a great addition for mainline work on our railroad. And that is the history of Cotton Belt 819. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And as I said, if you want the engine to be restored, please leave a comment in the comment section, or you can do this. You can or you can comment down below, what are your thoughts on the locomotive? I personally think that, they should give it to San Antonio for our steam excursion program, but guys, I think that can't happen because the engine's already owned by Pine Bluff, and that's why they're keeping it. Well, guys, thank you for watching, guys. May the force be with you. We are the Spy Ninjas, and keep on steaming. And guys, I'll see you next time when we discuss our next locomotive, and that engine will be Grand Trunk Western number 5629. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.